Hello and welcome to 1090, and here we see the Rotonda. Ancient building works. Let's see, the colors is burned out. Only this is the preferred mood of modern people. This burned out vision, which is lifeless. And I think this burned out vision is preferred because not so much is lifeless, but it's deathless. And by avoiding death, we also lose life. This is something we can learn from Heraclitus, that the modern wish for eternal life is actually a wish for eternal death. And we don't have any choice, because once thought is constructed in a certain way, it can only be escaped by understanding, and that understanding can only come from Heraclitus. I will continue with the Grandmaster. Let's see here if I can find a position that is fairly stable. This is, let's see here how we can fragment 16 D25. Greater deaths moroi are allotted greater destinies moirai. Formally speaking, this is another gem of artful construction in miniature. Of the 5 words of 96, the first 4 begin with the same letter. The first and fourth are cognates and near synonyms: moroi, moirai. Masculine and feminine noun formations from the root of meiromai, to receive as one's share. Here they correspond syntactically as subject and object of a verb. The second and third words represent the same adjective, structured syntactically by agreement with the corresponding noun: mesones, mesonas. Thus the syntactic pattern is AABB, but in meaning and morphology it is ABBA. The tight antiphonal symmetry is relieved by the longer and phonetically unrelated final word, lachanusi, whose meaning is closely akin to the root of moros and moira. I better stand up. That is a better, more dignified position for this grand lecture. Whose meaning is closely akin to the root of moros and moira. Receive as, one's share or portion. At first sight, the fragment is a mystifying tautology. Greater portions have allotted to them greater shares. Though etymologically sound, this trivial reading cannot suffice. The meaning of moros as portion or lot survives only in a few technical uses. From Homer on, the term acquires the literal sense of doom or violent death. The cognate moira does have a wide range of uses in which the etymological value is preserved: part, share, fraction, hence, allotted region, territory or share, esteem, social class. I was thinking of the word meridiana or merida, which is a portion. But moira in poetry characteristically refers to the personal fate of a man, his allotted share of life delimited by the moment of death. Thus Moira is personified as goddess, after Homer, goddesses of fate. where fate is understood in reference to death. Taking the words in this literary sense, we get a second reading. The magnitude of one's death determines the magnitude of one's destiny or share of life. There are two natural interpretations of this statement, neither of them entirely satisfactory. There may be an allusion here to the mystic promise of something beyond the grave, a fate far better for the initiated or purified souls than for the others. Who suffer punishment or lie in the mire. Such an allusion comes as a surprise, for the Heraclitean doctrine of survival seemed to point to a single destiny of elemental psychic recurrence for all alike. The only hint so far of possible differences in destinies beyond the grave lies in the threat that justice will lay hands on those who fabricate lies or testify to them. Previously mentioned D28b. And the lies in question seem to relate to the fate of the soul after death. It is not clear how this conception of justice, with a hint there of punishment and here of reward, can find a place within the monastic pattern of Heraclitus' thought. This is perhaps the most difficult problem for the interpretation of his philosophy as a coherent system. I return to it in the commentary on 109. There is a second, less mysterious interpretation, which poses similar problems for Heraclitus' monism, but which does explain how one's destiny can be determined by one's death or moros. This view, which interprets the greater destinies by reference to the traditional Greek glorification of a heroic death in battle, has been accepted by Diels and many other commentators. Since it appears to be confirmed by Heraclitus' own remarks about the pursuit of glory in D29, and the honor bestowed on those who die in battle, D24. The glory won by risking one's life in single combat is the theme of the Iliad, and Tertius speaks in similar terms of the warrior who defends his city in hoplite phalanx. Great is the share of honor for him who dies fighting in the forefront. He is lamented by young man and old alike. The whole city mourns him with terrible grief. His tomb and his children are pointed out among men, and his children's children and his race thereafter. Never will his noble fame Kleos perish, nor his name, but even when he lies under the earth he becomes immortal, Athanatos. He whom furious Ares destroys, as he excels in bravery, standing firm in combat, fighting for the sake of his land and his children. Now Heraclitus is not one to follow the poets who take the mob as his master, but he has chosen his terms in such a way as to suggest this traditional glorification of the hero's death. The classical exaltation of military death, echoed in Horace's Ode Pro Patria Mori, is part of the fundamental ideology of civic solidarity on which the city-state depended for its very existence. And Heraclitus has expressed his own endorsement of such a view in other texts, as when he speaks of holding fast to what is shared by all, and fighting for the law as for the city wall. Both mystic and military interpretations are surely relevant, but neither can render the full content of this tantalizing sentence. The initial appearance of tautology, reinforced by the extraordinary formal symmetry, strongly suggests that the greater rewards are somehow immanent in the quality of the death as such. Now to 117 to 118. 97 to 98, sorry. 97, D29. The best choose one thing in exchange for all, overflowing fame among mortals, but most men have sated themselves like cattle. 98, D20. Once born they want to live and have their portions, moroi, and they leave children behind, born to become their dooms, moroi. These two fragments belong together on thematic grounds. Both deal with the ends men choose in living, and there is formal reason for combining them. The understood subject of 98 is almost certainly hoi polloi, most people, mentioned in the last clause of 97, so that it is plausible to read the former as a direct continuation of the latter. Taken as a continuous text, it provides a commentary on 96. Recall hereby the word play on moros. 97 to 98 gives us two opposing conceptions of life and immortality. The choice of the noblest, hor aristoi, like Achilles in love with imperishable fame, kleos, in contrast to the desires and satisfaction of most men, hoi polloi, who are compared to cattle or beasts of burden, ktenea. The terms of heroic choice recall the cosmic value of fire, which, like gold, serves as payment for all things. D90. One thing in exchange for all. End of quote. The choice of the cattleman is described in terms of satiety, choros. In my arrangements, if my arrangement is correct, the same choice of beast-like satisfaction is described in 98, by reference to the sequence of generations. The cycle of generations is here reinterpreted as a cycle of births, ginomena genostai, equivalent to so many deaths, moro, both terms repeated in each clause. Achilles is the paradigmatic hero precisely because, when confronted with a clear choice between long life, aion, or undying fame, kleos, to be paid for by an early death, he unhesitatingly pursues the course of honor and death in combat. Heraclitus has generalized this choice as an option between two forms of death and survival, a flaming ardor for one thing in exchange for all, or the animal satisfaction of portions of life continued across the generation by generation. The latter course is not only common to cattle and sheep, it is in a larger sense the pattern of death and immortality for all things. In the river of overflowing change and recurrence, the former distinctively human choice is exemplified by, but scarcely limited to, the continuous stream of glory which flows from an heroic death in battle. The stylistic detail of 97 and 98 merits attention. We have seen how one thing in exchange for all in 97 establishes a formal parallel between the aim of a noble and the omnivalent principle of fire. The phrase which follows immediately, overflowing fame among literally of mortals, is marked by a curious syntactic ambiguity and a famous literary parallel. In his encomium on the glorious dead of Thermopylae, Simonides spoke of the tomb which is an altar, a funeral offering which his all-conquering time will not efface, and of Leonidas, who left behind a great adornment of excellence, aretas kosmon, and overflowing fame, aineon tekleos. Leonidas and his men would furnish a splendid example of what Heraclitus meant by its choice of the best or the noblest ones, hoi aristoi. The syntactic ambiguity pointed out by Bolak Wiesmann lies in the construction of the phrase overflowing fame of mortals with the preceding clause. The natural reading is to take this phrase as spelling out the one thing which the best will choose in exchange for all. But that construction, which must be included in the total meaning of 97, makes the genitive phneton of mortals curiously superfluous, not to say clumsy. The use of the genitive seems to be motivated by its formal parallel with the preceding panton, in place of all things. That parallel suggests that the best are related to mortals as the one, or glory of fire, is related to all things, so that these noblest ones becomes themselves the ever-renewed glory which is produced from and worth the price of the totality of mortal beings, thus taking overflowing fame in apposition with the subject hoi aristoi, rather than with the object of choice. We see these heroes as eternally rejuvenated from among the dying, out of the mortal, with a partitive construction, since it is precisely but such death that mortals become immortals. At least in the traditional sense illustrated in Proteus and Simonides, and perhaps in another sense yet to be specified. The composition of 98 contains a ring effect, suggesting a cycle of recurrence produced by the repetition of the same verb as first and last word in the sentence genomenoi genestai. This repetition is my excuse for rendering the verb twice, first born as children and then become, dooms. The double occurrence of moroi also highlights the motivosity of this term, which was implicit in 96. In its first occurrence here, to have one's moros seems to mean to get one's share of life, to obtain one's place in the sun. But from 96 and the literary use of moros elsewhere, we know that these portions of life are really dooms or deaths. In their animal pursuit of satiety choros, by trying to get their share of life, most men gain their share of death. Instead of leaving behind, like Leonidas, an adornment of excellence and everlasting fame. They leave behind children who will contest their power and control their property, first occupying their portions of life and then following them into the grave. Now to 99. Porphyry, according to Heraclitus, the beginning and the end. Peras are shared in the circumference of a circle. This is one of those remarks like 103, D60. The way up and down is one and the same. Might be equally appropriate in other Heraclitean contexts. To mark the diurnal recurrence of the sun, from darkness to darkness, the cycle of the year, the cosmic season, the transformation of elements into one another, and so on. I connect it here with the cycle of generations, seen as a cycle of mortality, in order to mark the pattern of ring composition, genomene genestai, in 98, and hence to characterize the cyclic form of immortality through dying, defined in 96 to 98. In this symmetrical pattern of periodic recurrence, the immortality of mankind does not differ in principle from that of beasts or even elements, as we have seen, since they too have their shares moroi in the universal life of nature. This generational cycle, in which like is regularly replaced by like, offers a mundane equivalent to that terrible grievous wheel of rebirth from which the mystic initiate hope to escape. For Heraclitus there is no escape, but there must be some alternative destiny represented by the choice of glory in 97, D29. Our understanding of his psychology and eschatology will not be complete until we can make sense of this nobler destiny within the context of Heraclitus's monism. There are two linguistic features of Porphyry's citation in 99, which suggests literal authenticity, which might offer a preliminary clue to the solution of our problem. One is the term peras, for the endpoint or limit of the circle. The only other occurrence of this word in the fragments is in the statement on the logos of the soul, so deep that we cannot find its limits, peirata, even if we travel over every path. So the endless cycle of 99 may allude to another endlessness of the psyche based on its own logos, which need not to be cyclical in the same sense. The second hint of verbal accuracy in 99 is the old Ionic form xenos, for shared, common. The use of this thematic term should be a hint that the circle in question is precisely the common pattern of cosmic order, but the concept of what is common has two dimensions. Objectively, it is the universal structure of unity, symmetry, and recurrence. Subjectively, it is the apprehension of this structure. Thus thinking is shared, xenos, by all, and men of understanding, nous, hold fast to what is shared by all, in their thoughts as in their speech and action. If the soul has its own mode of endlessness, that must consist precisely in the firm grasp of cosmic order, by which the few with understanding are distinguished from the many. who exemplify but do not comprehend the universal pattern. D24. Gods and men honor those who fall in battle. Are fataoi. Those who are slain by Ares. One commentary on C. Has already been provided by Tyrtaeus' description of the extraordinary honors that men heap upon the grave and memory of him whom Ares has destroyed. What C adds to this traditional thought is honor from the gods as well. If we translate this according to the transpositions of 92 and 93, we can say honor among the dead as well as among the living, honors in larger fate of the psyche and not only at the grave and in the memory of men. The parallel between gods and men recalls D53, where war as king of all appoints some as gods, others as men. It seems likely that the exceptional status of those who die sur le champ d'honneur is somehow connected with the fact that the god's Ares, who destroys them, can himself be identified with King Polemos, the universal power of conflict and opposition. This link to D53 makes of C more than a banal restatement of traditional Greek respect for those who die in battle, but it does not yet explain how the special honors given by the gods are to be integrated with the general theory of the psyche and its destiny. And I think that's quite enough for this afternoon. I say thank you very much and do enjoy your day. Bye bye for now.